I'm hoping this letter encouraging others to come forward to expose the depravity of this man.
Two school-going boys accused a teacher of raping them. Fellow learners stood in solidarity with them and held a demonstration at Jan Moore Secondary School in Windhoek, sparking a public protest which saw activists, trade unions, and political parties rallying against the manner in which the school had handled the situation. The accused, Aristides Kamutuka, has been teaching for decades and is said to have served as a hostel supervisor, a soccer coach, and a maths teacher. He has also been accused of the crime before, but the leaders, those who were supposed to protect the children in their care, did nothing.
The victim is my friend, and this has been going around in the school ever since last year. And me knowing that this is happening as an individual, of course I do not feel safe in my own school. And yes, there are other teachers, of course, that do these things as well. And I just feel like, that's not apart from the rape, but I just feel it was a good thing that we, the seniors, brought it up. It has been something that has always been swept under the carpet. No one ever spoke about it. We've just heard about boys, basically, no females. We were kept in school. They didn't want us to join the protest outside. As you have seen through the day, the kids were in the school and the people outside were protesting. They didn't want to let us, they didn't want to let us come out to protest as well. This protest was needed, but the fact that my school didn't respond to the request, that hurts my emotions, because this is something we, the seniors, came up with. We're just fighting for justice. Every day you will hear a new story. Things are happening in the country. Even in schools, we're not safe anymore. So this is trauma to us as kids, because how do we focus on our school work?
Gender-based violence has been a challenge in our country, and the girl child, the boy child are always victims of this. But what actually made us to come into this case specifically was because we have learned through sources that the first case from the victim, or the first case reported from this school, was reported back in 2013. And seeing that this case was reported in 2013, that's 9 years dating back now, and nothing was done. But because a learner came out, because a learner spoke out, let's say because the case reached the public, that's where the school decided to act up. So we then got into this case because we have the opinion, how many more learners did not fall victim to this? How many more learners are out there that are not affected? So that's why we actually came into this case. Yeah, as Nanso, we arrived 6 o'clock in the morning, and we came here, but because the objective was to lock down the school. We didn't want our learners, because as a student organization, we represent our learners. We didn't want them to enter. The reception we got from the school was very bad. Firstly, we didn't get the audience of the principal. We requested it. We didn't get the audience of any HOD or any management. The only thing we got from the police was a text, because I myself and a few of our colleagues and students, we were pepper sprayed because we wanted to apply a lock to the gate. And that's all the police did. But the police, we feel that the police are not doing justice to the learners, because why should they only apply the law when we want to protest? Why can't they apply the law or even to investigate? We had Operation Kalahari, set another operation, Operation Gender-Based Violence. But from the side of the police, we got nothing. The gentleman that was reported, the ministry found out, but as we got from the reports, all was done. The case was solved internally, and they simply reshuffled. Now, reshuffling does not solve the case. What happens to the dignity? What happens to the mental health of that specific learner that was affected in this case? So, all in all, the nation, we as student leaders, we as a student organization feel the nation is not doing enough, because we should understand that this is one case, or this is a few cases from one school. Now, how many cases in the rest of the country are not there? We have schools that are in rural areas. How many of those learners in rural areas are not facing the exact same situation? And here it was a case of sodomy, but you can also go to the girl child. How many of our learners, how many of our fellow brothers and sisters are not facing the same challenges? And we have school counselors there and everything, but nothing is happening.
Rapists run rampant in Namibian society, and Namibian children are regularly violated sexually. Government is dragging its feet by not passing relevant legislation, further entrenching the sentiment that they really don't care about us. This tweet by Namibian investigative journalist Shinovene Emmanuel reads as follows. The school principal wrote to the newspaper accusing the newspaper of distortion, and I quote, "Your article on sodomy at Jan Moore Secondary School in the Namibian of 15th August 2013 contains a number of errors which have done irreparable harm to our school."
No two Marias are the same, so why should their cover be? We know that no two people are the same. That's why our new personal cover lets you build the kind of cover that's right for you, from the premium you pay to the extras you choose. It's easy to change, as your life does too. The time is now to get personal cover that's just for you. SMS the word COVER to 555 and we will call you back.
Take a look. Brace yourself for an unbelievable TV deal.
It's a win-win.
DSTV is offering you the same mind-blowing entertainment at a fraction of the price.
Unbelievable.
For a limited time only, get an HD decoder, dish and installation, plus 1 month DSTV compact, cut down from $1,199 to just $999.
This is madness.
Get it now.
It's scary how they do what we like.
Yes. Because it's the best for even less with DSTV.
Activist Nashilongwe Shipwe Mushanja has been at the forefront of most of the protests that have erupted following the calls by Namibian youth to government to intervene in sexual gender-based violence, which is rampant in the country. Too often, the protesters are met with resistance and violence from the police.
It's obviously very sad and very disheartening because it just shows how pervasive the situation is, right? We protested last year, there was a shift. You saw how more and more people came out speaking. These young people that came and protested last week at this school is a continuity of that. But I think we are in a really new time where we want to speak out and we want to hold leaders accountable. We want to hold everyone accountable, rapists, perpetrators of violence accountable. So it's a very sad situation that even young people, students, learners, have to fight for their voices in this way, have to fight for justice. And that shouldn't be the case, because schools should be the most safest places ever.
I asked him just how much rape is indoctrinated in Namibian culture.
I think it's so indoctrinated because apart from it being very within our traditions, in our domestic spaces, in our homes, in our schools, we haven't done enough to challenge that indoctrination, right? So we don't teach feminism in our life skills classes, for example. That in itself tells you that our own education system is not ready to deal with that indoctrination. It's very deeply rooted in the very teaching and learning even. That's why teachers are raping.
I asked Nashilongwe Shipwe whether any other official from the school or from government had come to meet the protesters.
We stood here in the sun. The principal came, but did not come with the learners because they held them hostage in the hall. They didn't want them to come protest. So he eventually came, but he didn't come with the learners. So we told him to go back. There was also director of education or somebody, but they didn't even, we read now the demands with the students, but they didn't even, they were not here. So there is also a lack of accountability from our leadership, and we've emphasized this over and again, that people don't know how to hold space. So you have principles, but people cannot even engage with protesters.
The youth have been calling for the resignation of Gender and Child Welfare Minister Doreen Siyoka, and I have made several requests with her office to grant us an interview, to no avail. I asked Nashilongwe Shipwe whether the protesters are still baying for her blood or not.
I think our stance is still the same. She must go. She must resign, right? Because she's not effective in that position. She's not present. She is out of touch with what's happening not only in Namibia but in the world, because this is a global issue. It doesn't only happen in Namibia. It's not only in Namibia, you know. So I think she should go, as in yesterday. Yeah, but also if she doesn't go, we can always go back there to remind her that she must go, because this is a reminder that we need leadership that is accountable, but also leadership that is transparent and reflective, critically reflective.
I asked Nashilongwe Shipwe to share his views on the manner in which the police treat them during protests.
They protect walls and fences and gates. That's why we've been outside the whole day, because police is a gatekeeper of rape. Police is a gatekeeper of violence, right? So we had to convince them for hours to go in and go call the principal so that he can engage us. And that's completely unacceptable. And I think that also speaks largely not only to the law enforcement, but also the justice system. Everything is delayed. So really the change that needs to happen on all levels of the system. So the transformation that needs to happen on all levels of the system. So I don't think the police is serious, because if they were serious, they would have set up shelters of safety by now, which we've been calling for years. We've been calling, Shut It All Down has been calling for shelters of safety. None of that is done. I can go on and on and on. So I'm sorry, we are not impressed with police right now. In fact, they were pushing us. They pepper sprayed us this morning because they didn't want us to go in there. So that tells you what their thinking is. They protect perpetrators and walls of schools, but they don't protect victims and survivors of violence. In fact, they can pepper spray protesters who are unarmed.
After a long hiatus, the Office of the Ombudsman finally filled the position of the Children's Advocate in 2018. I spoke to Ingrid Hasselman and asked her what her office is doing for Namibia's children.
The reason why there must be a children's advocate is because children are very vulnerable based on their state of development. So the treaty bodies to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, they've recommended, as they do with other countries, that there be a specific person who is dedicated to children's rights, because what we do is we're an individual complaint receiving body. So the primary function is basically to receive complaints and investigate those complaints in respect of children, and they can be with regard to human rights violations or just generally in regard to maladministration. So the Child Care and Protection Act, which is the most important piece of legislation that is put in place for the protection of children, only came into operation on the 30th of January 2019, even though it had been promulgated already in 2015. And then this piece of legislation also makes provision for the appointment of the Children's Advocate. So yes, we receive complaints and we investigate them, and then we issue reports and we make recommendations. For instance, if because certain institutions must provide services to children, and particularly in government, so the Ministry of Gender Equality is responsible for the implementation of the Child Care and Protection Act. So every little provision that's in there, it's their duty to implement it. For instance, there is a provision in the Act that makes that provides for an offender's register. So if a person is convicted of serious offences, like for example murder or trafficking or any sexual offence like rape, then that person is supposed to be entered onto that register. And then the idea is that everybody who works with children, whether or not you are a teacher or you even just a cleaner at a school, So when you, in your day-to-day activities, come into contact with children, then you are supposed to then get a clearance certificate from the police. Once this provision of the Act is implemented, it has not yet been implemented. So part of our function is also to make sure that the Act is properly implemented. So we, from time to time, we engage the Ministry of Gender Equality about this, and we have then, for the past 2 years since the Act came into operation, we've been in contact, continuous engagement with them, and trying to give them the support and encouragement we needed to get these things implemented. And we've recently heard back from the Ministry of Gender that they are planning to have this register operational by March this year. The other thing that we do is we also have the power to intervene in children's court proceedings as a party, and we can also represent children, and then we can also approach the High Court or any competent court for an order to interdict the offending party from to stop what they're doing that's harmful to children.
This Valentine's month, GoTV's bringing home the love. Fall in love with the drama in our daily telenovelas and prepare to be wowed by the men in uniform that get our hearts racing. Show your very own local legends some love and LOL at your favorite celebrity crush on our international channels. Then give the kids something you'll both like. Super cool shows that are fun and educational. If you're looking to bring the family closer this month, get GoTV today and bring home the love. GoTV, love it.
In this, the land of the truly brave, where men rape without impunity, we too often find that there are policies and guidelines in place that are often just not adhered to. They have the time and the diligence to change laws so that they can steal from us, but when it comes to being accountable, crickets. I asked the children's advocate Ingrid Hasselman whether she thinks the Minister of Gender Equality and Child Welfare, Doreen Sioka, is doing enough to protect the rights of children.
There are certain areas in which they are certainly lacking, and when we pick up on things like this, so we can do own motion investigations when we see, when we pick up in the media, especially about children's rights violations, or if somebody brings it to our attention. For instance, there was an issue with a couple of months ago, or towards the end of last year, where there were media reports about a young boy who was being detained at Rehoboth police station. So what we then did was we engaged the ministry to find out what it is that they are doing, and because the Child Care and Protection Act provides that children must not be detained in police holding cells. So there are various options over to the minister to put in place to declare certain, any place, like even a school hostel, as a place of safety. And the idea is that when children are in conflict with the law, if they get charged with anything, that they are supposed to be detained there, should circumstances warrant it. And so we did an investigation, and we found out that there are a lot of children who are being detained in police holding cells, which is not ideal, obviously, and is not in their best interest, because oftentimes the facilities are not such so that they can be separated from the adult offenders. So we then approached the minister and we asked her as to intervene and to make sure that this does not happen. We ended up having to go to court and then to compel her, and then we got an order that she must provide answers by the 31st of March this year regarding declaring certain places as places of safety where these children can be detained. So that's the type of thing that we do. And yes, I can only agree that the Child Care and Protection Act is an amazing piece of legislation, and it comprehensively deals with child protection. But if it's not implemented, then it really serves no purpose.
I asked the children's advocate what she plans to do about the rapes that have allegedly taken place over a number of years at the Jan Moore School.
Personally, it's always horrific when children are targeted by predators, and once again, the Act have these provisions to protect children, because my stance on it is like the Ministry of Basic Education also has a good legal framework, and they have what they call the School Safety Framework, and it's an excellent piece of policy document. But once again, if it's not implemented, then it serves no purpose. So when children are at school, it means that the teachers and the management of that school is like standing in for the parent under those circumstances. So they have a duty of care towards those children, and they must make sure that they are safe. So when a teacher, because I understand that this particular teacher, there've been other allegations over the years. What people don't always understand is that criminal prosecution or disciplinary processes are not dependent upon criminal proceedings. So even though somebody doesn't lay a charge and the person is not prosecuted, it does not mean that the person cannot be disciplined internally by the employer. So, and that disciplinary process can lead to the person getting dismissed. And that is essentially what should happen. And when children make allegations of abuse, then it must be taken very seriously. And because with sexual offenders, like sexual predators who target children, it doesn't just happen out of the blue. Normally there's a process involved. It's called grooming, where they make the child very comfortable with them, and because they're in a position of trust, and then children often don't disclose, and so once it happens, it's bound to happen again. So action must be taken immediately in order to remove these types of people from circumstances where they have contact with children. And this is the reason why the register is so important.
The rape culture in this country is simply disgusting. And I asked the children's advocate, Ingrid Hasselman, what we can do about it.
I think awareness is very important, because a lot of children don't have access to information, as much as we would like to believe that we're living in this age of information. A lot of children, the reality in Namibia is that they don't. There are certain cultural things and societal things where children are raised to be seen and not be heard, and that all of those things contributes to children either not, number one, not knowing their rights, and even if they do, they don't have that ability to assert themselves and to demand for their rights to be respected. So I think the way that we need to address this is by really focusing on kids on a very young age, on education, and because they are ultimately the custodians of their rights. So because these things happen in homes and in seclusion oftentimes. So there's not sometimes an adult to see. What then happens is that we must empower children to take care of themselves, to assert themselves, to tell an adult when something's happening, when something's not right. Like so many kids don't go to school, and it's the parents' responsibility to make sure that a child goes to school. But if that parent obviously has no inclination to be doing that, then the child is harmed, nobody sees, nobody says anything. So really, I believe that the way that we're going to change our community is to empower children.
And with that, it's a wrap. Stay woke with It's a Wrap by following us on our social media pages. It's a Wrap Nam on Insta, It's a Wrap Namibia on YouTube, and It's a Wrap with Erica Gebhardt on Facebook.
Jesus.